If a man has not discovered something that he will die for, he is not fit to live. This is a famous quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Have you found something worth giving your life to? Today, we're gathering in church on Anzac Day and doing something profound. We're remembering. And it's not about glorifying war, but there are some things that as a nation, it's very important that we don't forget. And with recent events threatening to pull us back into war, Anzac Day is a very real reminder of the cost of war and a reason to stop and to remember. We remember men and women who stepped forward and who said, I'll give myself for something larger than me. Adventists have often opposed violence, and so many Adventists have served as medics, as stretcher bearers, as healers. But the same thing holds true. They've put themselves in harm's way for the sake of others. They believed that some things were worth the cost. And so every year, our nation pauses to remember. Because if we don't remember, we lose not only the past, but we lose the moral value that places on the present. Remembrance is not something that we only do on Anzac Day, however. It's deeply biblical. In Scripture, God commands us over and over again, remember. And Israel's faith wasn't based on an abstract idea, it was based on remembered acts of what God had done. Their calendar was full of festivals that remembered the acts of God. Can anyone think of a Jewish festival that remembers the acts of God? Passover? Yes. Any others? There should be a slide with a picture of it that might remind you what this tabernacles. Yes. And we're celebrating one of them today. Sabbath. Thank you. And we have the Day of Atonement as well, and others. And these were not empty rituals, they were living memory. And we all have our own remembrances of what God has done. And as Pastor David pointed out in the Bethel group chat this week, I have a remembrance this week. It was 5 years ago yesterday that I stood up here out the front at Wallsend and I made my profession of faith, gave my testimony and said I wanted to be part of this church. And I like to remember back to that day and remember how excited I felt about God and how excited I was to tell others. And I also like to look back and see what God has done in my life since that day. And as we read in Exodus 13, Moses said to the people, "Remember this day on which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, because the Lord brought you out from there by strength of hand. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th there shall be a festival to the Lord. You shall tell your children on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. It shall serve for you as a sign on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, so that the teaching of the Lord may be on your lips. For with a strong hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. You shall keep this ordinance at the proper time from year to year. I like it that he says, remember this day and tell your children, this is what the Lord did for me. This is not what the Lord did for his people. This is not what the Lord did for someone else. This is what the Lord did for me. Because God's story is meant to become our story. His acts in history are for us. And we don't just want to recall them. And he wasn't asking Israel to just recall the Passover here. He was asking them to participate, allowing God's acts to shape who they were in the present, as we should allow them to shape us now. For Israel, Passover returned them to that single night in Egypt. It may have been a night of fear. It was definitely a night of judgment and a night of rescue. They were slaves. They were oppressed. They were powerless. They were voiceless. But God told them to take a lamb, a perfect lamb, and to kill it, and to put the blood from that lamb on the doorposts of their house. And then when the angel of judgment passed through that land, all of those whose houses were marked by that blood were spared. It wasn't because they were righteous. It wasn't because they were brave. But it was because they were covered by that blood. And so then God says to them, never forget this. Every year, tell your children, every year, remember that I am the God who saves. And it's interesting, in the Passover meal that we read about in the New Testament, there were 4 cups by New Testament time. And these are based on Exodus 6:6-7. They weren't actually part of the original Passover meal. They were added in Jewish tradition before the time that Jesus came. And Exodus 6:6-7 says, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will free you from the burdens of the Egyptians and deliver you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. So the 4 cups that the Jewish people celebrated were, the first was, I will bring you out. The second one was, I will rescue you. And the third cup symbolized, I will redeem you. And the fourth was, I will take you as my people. So as they ate this Passover meal and as they drank these cups, there were layers of remembering and layers of meaning. This was celebrating redemption. But as Israel remembered deliverance, they still waited to see it come in fullness. As they remembered the rescue, they still lived under the weight of sin. Their story wasn't complete. And so now we fast forward to Matthew chapter 26. It says, while they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to his disciples, and said, take, eat. This is my body. Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink from this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it with you in my Father's kingdom. So Jesus sat down with his disciples for this very same Passover meal. The same story, the same symbols, but something had changed. He didn't simply sit down with them to remember the Passover. He sat down to redefine it. He used the words from the Passover liturgy. The original words were, "This is the bread which our ancestors ate in Egypt." And instead of that, he says, "This bread is my body." And as he took the cup, he said, "This is the blood of my covenant, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Now this was quite shocking, really. He's taking the Passover and he's changing the liturgy. He's not saying, "I'm remembering that lamb long ago." He's saying, "I am the lamb." This whole rehearsal of the Passover year after year, this remembrance has all been pointing forwards to me. He's saying, "I am the lamb that willingly gives myself." This is not just a reminder or a symbol anymore. This is reality. Everything that Passover had been pointing forward to was now happening in the person of Jesus. And when he says, "This is the blood of my covenant," the disciples would have heard echoes of Sinai. Because in Exodus, we read of Moses sprinkling the blood on the people. And as he sprinkles it, he says, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you." And so now Jesus is saying there is a new covenant. And unlike on Mount Sinai where it was written on tablets of stone, the covenant that Jesus is making is written on our very hearts. In Scripture, the third cup in the Passover meal symbolised, in Scripture, the cup can symbolise blessing. Like you can think of the Psalms where it says, "My cup runneth over." But in Scripture, the cup also symbolises judgment quite frequently, and you can think of passages in Revelation where we're told of the cup of God's wrath, and in Gethsemane where Jesus is talking of drinking the cup. And this third cup in the Passover meal, which is the one that Jesus is saying now is the cup that is his blood, it was the cup that symbolised redemption by judgment. And Jesus knows full well what this cup symbolises. He knows that he will drink what we could not. That he will take the full weight of our sin, the full force of our judgment. And Jesus knew that if he didn't drink that cup, we could not be saved. And Isaiah says he poured out his life unto death, and he bore the sin of many. Jesus wasn't merely sharing a meal. He was enacting his death. And the language he used was not accidental. It was deeply costly, sacrificial language, and it was full of so much symbolism from the Old Testament. So we looked earlier at that quote from Martin Luther King Jr., "If a man has not discovered something he will die for, he's not fit to live." Jesus didn't just find something worth dying for. He found you worth dying for. And he wants us to remember his sacrifice. And so he did something beautiful. He showed us that he is the Passover lamb. It is that his blood that saves us. And he told us to repeat this meal over and over and over again when we meet together to remember what he has done for us. Most of all, He wants us to remember how much he loves you and that you are worth dying for. And just like Jesus' first disciples, we're going to celebrate this meal together today.